Hello everyone. So it's another Sunday night, and I took a lot of notes on the section, so I'll just get to it. For Unit 9, talking about reflecting, having a self reflection on the people that actually helped you in the effort to keep you to develop for human development. And the chapter opens up with a quote that I really liked. It was on page 210 about, for every person that reaches adulthood, a great deal of effort has been made to keep that person alive. And the idea of identifying individuals who are fundamental to our development, because we didn't get here on our own. There was help from teachers, parents, grandparents, siblings, other children, other people, friends, close acquaintances, whomever that helped you along on this journey. And I love that the chapter reflected on so many different activities to basically, if you will, I'm trying to think of the word, to provocate that self-discovery. That was the word. And that the reading activities were encouraging students to see that the reading activities were encouraging children to think about who has been helpful for their development. So in one of them, it suggests reading books that encourage children to see people help the protagonist, like a book that we read in my classroom called This Book Ate My Dog, which is about community helpers and the readers helping the main protagonist, little girl, get her dog back in the story. And I love that it shows children that people need help, that not everybody has it figured out, that everybody needs help, not just kids. And that sometimes we do need a little help along the way, and acknowledging that and being thankful for it. And also going into objective 2, reflecting on the characteristics of a person that results in that person becoming significant to us. So that would also fall in with another book. I like to put things in terms of books. It's just easier and lesson-wise, and it's how I'm able to get the information to the kids in a more creative way, in a way that we can just reflect on and talk about. So we talk about Little Puppy and the Big Green Monster, and how the little puppy keeps bothering the big green monster. And he's mean, and he doesn't want anything to do with this cute little puppy. And then all of a sudden, the puppy finds out that the big green monster's just alone, and he's lonely. And that's why he's so mean. So all of a sudden, all these characteristics of the puppy's kindness, it makes the monster love the puppy and decide to adopt him, and using those as a self-reflection journey for the kids. Obviously, I work with 3-year-olds, so the way that I do self-reflection and talking about certain issues is completely different than maybe how somebody would approach this in an older or even secondary education way. So moving on, we talked about the relationship with people and their development and their self-progression and how it helps the development of the person. Relationship with grandparents, whether it be grandparents are super helpful. I'm super lucky. I have the best grandparents, and I wouldn't be half the person I would be that I am today if it wasn't for particularly my grandpa. Moving on, and then we talk about that. We talk about parents. Now, this section, it had a lot of darker tones. It talked about Lori Wellman's poem and how her father had autism, and basically the way that we reflect on parents and their help with their development. But unfortunately, we kind of reflect on that when it's a little bit of a darker time, when we think about, like, for instance, my mom had a serious health scare, which has been pretty much eating away at most of the semester. And it's just, you start to reflect on the way that they had your development. And it's good to teach children this self-reflection process before the darker tones, as I was thinking of, come in, and thinking of the happier times and how they were beneficial to you then, before it seems too late. Because in Lori's poem, it's so sad. She talks about how this is the man that she loves that she doesn't even know who she is. Then we talk about children, siblings, and any other person that inspires you. I love that the whole chapter was about students taking that admiration and love, and appreciation for the investment others have made into their development, and putting it to words, into art, and so many different inspired activities, including. Oh, and then it was talking about books inspired by teachers. So being able to life stories that would be told to demonstrate I'm getting the topics confused. I'm sorry, my notes are a bit of a mess. To keep a clear train of thought, but also to make authorship of your ideas and authorship of the fact that this is how you feel, and the authorship of your self-reflection is basically what I think I was getting at in that section. For Unit 2, oh my, I gotta go faster. The exploration of the self from quality, strength, rekindling dreams, acknowledging the significance of our actions, and basically a historical perspective. So basically this whole chapter is about self-discovery and revisiting childhood memories to find a better understanding of our roots and to be able to express that and have activities that allow children to express that sort of identification. So basically it's around the whole poem Where I Come From by Isabel Campoy on page 236. And it's more than a geographical location. It's about the environment, the physical, as well as the cultural, where she discusses food, advice from loved ones, political influences, progress, and emotional development. And it's more than just saying, I'm from Spain. These are my parents' names. That's it. She's encompassing basically who she is as a three-dimensional person in abstract terms. So and it ties into objective 2, which is to acknowledge our origin and accept our past as the point of departure for the present and the future. So in 241, we talk about the self-reflection questions to create this poem in this book. So to make, for example, what's the most memorable item you see in your childhood home? Those sort of questions to kind of compose this poem to create a portrait of who you are as a 3D person. It's an excellent activity. I definitely could not do it with my kids. However, I tried to do it because, if I were to ever ask a student to do this, I need to be able to do it myself. I'm not a poet, so I tried. This is my I Come From poem. I come from an antique wardrobe decorated with silver platters. I come from a sturdy magnolia tree and the aromatic gardenia flowers. I come from a woman's strength and a dog's loyalty. I come from you are stronger than you think you are. I come from fried chicken and deviled eggs after church. I come from the salty ocean and the sand underneath my toes. I come from the dusty boxes in the cupboard, home to all my memories. I come from nowhere. I ended up here, and a part of me wants to just go back. So that's my attempt at the poem. Moving on. So that was an awesome, interesting self-reflection and walk down memory lane. Oh my, look at the time. Tamer chapter 7. I wasn't kidding. There's a lot of notes and a lot of opinions. This just made me think of one thing. So, I actually know somebody who's taking the Intro to Diversity class in Miami-Dade, and they were talking about the importance of second language learning and how fundamentally how it can be confusing, and the importance of trying to help a person learning second language. And basically what they did is an experiment is they made you watch something in Portuguese, and they're like, okay, how well did you understand that video? That's what it's like for a person who maybe isn't comfortable with English or trying to teach a lesson in some like basic Portuguese. And this is how a person learning a second language feels in an English language environment. And how do you have to be sensitive of it? This whole chapter was perfect because it's about an early childhood education classroom, which is my whole day. That's my whole life right now. So going in through it really quick. So it's the way to facilitate second language learning and literacy learning and helping a second language learner in a developmental curriculum. So activity period, which to me is open center, story time, snack, lunchtime, what I call large and small groups, as well as outside time and meeting time, aka circle time. I never understood the term circle time just simply because if you're meeting on a rectangular carpet, it's not a circle time. So to each his own. I call it meeting time. And also at my school, it's a Jewish school, so we have Shabbat. So we have a lot going on. So there's NACI and the IRA principles. The principles and practices are meant to teach and enhance development and learning. So, for instance, if a first language learner is learning through, we established that first language learners are learning through social interaction with family, and second language learners are learning with adults, and maybe in a classroom they're trying to fine-tune things, and they're learning in a different environment aspect. So they're encouraged to engage in meaningful interactions that'll help in a classroom, which they basically are they're trying to say is they want children in a classroom where the children are encouraged to engage in meaningful interactions that are helpful to others, that will be facilitating of the second language learning. So we went from the Ada and Campoy sections about self-reflection and basically acknowledging people in development, and now we're going into second language learning in the early childhood environment. So NAEYC has a lot to say about this. Like they had a lot of sections, and I've already taken enough of your time, so I'm not going to go over them verbatim. However, I will go into page 107 where it talks about breaking down the activities in order to facilitate that oral language development. So we talked about activity time, whether it be teacher directed or, as I like to call them, provocations, where you're running commentary on what they're doing, where you're saying, oh, I see that you have the orange ball, or whatever that they're doing. Child initiated. This actually happens more time than you would think when you have open center time and they're like, hey, I wonder what would happen if. And you say, sure. And you let them figure it out and you walk them through running commentary of what their thought process is and what they're trying to create. Book reading, story time, obviously very important. Keeping it short, keeping it sweet, keeping it prompt, so that way the children don't lose focus and attention. You're not going to read them. I don't like to drone out kids, and I don't believe in doing back-to-back books because that's just asking too much of them. Right now, they're kind of obsessed with The Elephant and the Pig series by Mo Williams, because they're super short, they're to the point, but they have rich vocab, and it allows us to ask our 3 questions where we like to recall and talk about what we learned in the story. And it's been going really well. Snack at lunchtime. So instead of where you're making how would you make a snack time and lunchtime a language and literacy rich environment, one may ask. Well, for starters, instead of calling them Cheerios, I call them Circle Snack. I ask kids, how many things do you have? What shape is your lunch? What shape is the container that your lunch is in? And so on. And just asking questions and keeping the dialogue going. It's a relaxed environment. We're not doing anything, but we can still talk about stuff. Like, oh, when they talk about their mom, I'll ask them what's their mom's actual name and stuff like that to keep them kind of going. And it's also been very beneficial to the little girl in my class who is learning spoken English from sign language. Outside time, using linguistic games like Duck Duck Goose, or I like to play the opposite game. So I'll say, run really fast. That means stop. Or we have rules and we make the whole opposite games. Sit up, and they have to stand. It's a whole thing. My brain is mentally fried, but it really works if you actually play it in person. It's how we introduce opposites. Meeting time. So we have our good morning song, or good morning, counting, calendar, news. Consistency is key when it comes to meeting time. So that way the same things happen at the same time every day, and a linguistically rich vocab in the meeting time. I like to do a short introduction to what we may be doing that day, and I mean brief, because by dismissal time, and how long dismissal can take sometimes from our meeting times, because we're in the later half of the school year, it's a little bit more complex. I don't want to eat up more of the intention by introducing a small thing that I can do just in large group or small group later. So fast forward to page 116, where they talk about the language acquisition preschool in Kansas that has an integrated approach for language use and interaction, and how it provides, it lists a bunch of steps and how it provides focus, simulation of particular language features, routines to help children connect with events and stimulate social interaction between children. And it's a whole step of basically just, in short, it's just second language learning curriculum friendly, where the whole intention is to just reinforce English development skills, but also be super accommodating and helpful to the children that are learning a second language. The biggest one I took away from it was stimulate social interaction between children. AKA, why don't you ask so-and-so to help you instead? That happens more than most. The more. I like to do it just for confidence and for interaction reasons, and to see what the other children learn, because if they know it confidently enough, that means they can teach it to somebody else. And that's why I use it. didn't know it could be used in a second language learning environment sort of context. Really cool to know that. Fast forward to page 119, and we talk about literacy development for the second language learners, letter recognition, sounds, the books. Wow, how does a book work? Vocab, as well as recall and imagination. So the chapter ends with, the last page of my notes, the usage of home languages into, that connects to. I'm going to go to page 123 when it talks about facilitating. That talks about the different steps that facilitating second language learning in an ECD classroom. We talked about this routine, incorporating the home language into the curriculum. Maybe we briefly talked about that, but how important it is to be able to boost the self-confidence of the first language. And then it builds pride in the first language culturally and just knowledge-wise, as well as building confidence in the second language, and it becomes more cognitively challenging. Discussions with English-speaking children, and finding activities for second language students to feel included and confident. Last but not least, oh my god, look at the time, language teaching and methodology. After going over all of the methodologies, which I've never heard of most of them, so it was nice to learn some new stuff. I like the idea of the total physical response by James Asher. My kids do that a lot. We already do this already. We act out when I have new ideas or whatever. I'll have the kids act out or teach another child with everybody. And I think it's interesting, the idea that children do listen before they talk. At least a lot of children that are apprehensive, they're in a new environment. And the idea of the verbal commands is the increase in complexity because you're acting out something, you're giving commands. And I think that's really interesting. If you could maybe make a game out of it, make it a play. I call it ECD theater, where the kids have to act out a situation. So they're listening to directions, they're using their critical thinking skills and their language skills to act out a situation. So all in all, oh boy, did I have a lot to say on all those issues. I hope you have a wonderful week, and good night.